So as we continue our journeys through the brand new released Morticians and Ratcatchers cards, it comes across my favourite little combination and the model that I think got me into Morticians in form of Brain, Pan and Memory. Oh, how I love this puppet. My favourite target for Tooled Up and my least favourite target for Knee Slider. Not one solitary change on the cards. They are perfect, just like Obulus. They do everything that I want them to do. I suppose but the game has changed around them, and I think that's worth more consideration than anything else. With the tap-in rules changing, it means Brainpan passing to Memory is a 4-dice tap-in at 4 inches, which is not insignificant. However, Memory's goal scoring ability is now a tap in at 2 inches, which previously, I would frequently try and get snapshots with Memory from Brainpan. Because I required one less momentum due to due to thought. Sorry, due to 1-2 on Brainpan, which, whilst the wording has changed to incorporate the new names for these things, hasn't changed in any other way. However, I don't think I'll be making snapshots with Memory anymore, because 2 dice needing 4s is considerably worse than 2 dice needing 3s, unless I'm within 2 inches, and I won't be, let's be honest. But the big thing really that I want to talk about is those tap-ins and how that's changing. Gents, anyone want to comment on that?
I mean, Memory falls into the camp of Mother and Salt, where they're probably the models that are getting hit the hardest by this. Any model that is used to all their shots being tap-ins, now basically never getting tap-ins, does hit them fairly hard. Yeah. Memory's also hit by the fact that Bonesaw's a lot better.
Oh, you mean it purely as a striker?
Yeah, because for a while, Memory was really your best goal threat, and I think Bonesaw's a lot better now. So I think you're going to actually see Brainpan and Memory less than you have been. I still think they're very good, though.
Yeah, I mean, the momentous tackle on 1 for Brainpan is excellent. Although, whilst he's got striker written on the card, to me, he is a bit like Greed. Not just because of the 2 model comparison, but also because I don't use him as a striker. A TAC 5 playbook, which, a TAC 5 model with a 4-long playbook and with a free crowd out from himself effectively in Brainpan. Or as we mentioned earlier, we talked about Dirge pulling him in as well, although that will take positioning. He is probably, for my money, one of the best beaters in the Morticians Guild. Like, having that playbook which wraps so very easily with a few crowd outs, let alone the singled outs and things like that. The only thing that really he can't make use of is confidence, because Memory doesn't have his own activation, so therefore Obulus can't confidence him to attack confidently, at least. But yeah, all right, yes, Bonesaw is probably going to take over his striker responsibility, but in terms of what Memory does in the center of the pitch, in just pure devastation in terms of damage results, I think that'll still be the same.
Memory also brings a lot of value for no influence. So what I like about Memory is it's one of the best models in the game at doing a lot with 4 influence or doing a lot with 0 influence. And I still think that's true, especially in Morticians, where most models tend to either not want much influence, like Original Graves, or pretty consistently want influence.
Yeah.
So I think you'll still see Memory. I think in my mind, it's Memory and Cosset kind of fill that same role, where they can either take a bunch of influence and kill the world, or do stuff without influence.
That's
and I think with how tight the 12 is, you'll probably take one of them.
You probably put
but I could be wrong.
Into that category as well.
That's a good point. Pelage probably fits in there as well.
Yeah, because she does a lot of damage if you let her, if you put that influence on. Equally, just walking up to someone and going, "Do you want 3 damage or snared?" is quite considerable.
Yeah, I think Pelage is probably a closer comparison for me, because Memory, if anything else, gives you a 7th kind of melee zone that people have to move around.
And
unless I'm horribly mistaken, I believe he still makes parting blows as well. With that playbook at TAC 7, that's not a thing you want happening.
I've had that wrap before to do 4 damage. It's rough.
Yeah, and if you're tooled up, you're looking at considerably more than 5. Memory is if you go back and watch my Morticians against the Battlehammer Parkers farmers, pretty much 1 round in Grange with memory was hilarious.
I'm sure he took it really well.
The tables were flipped, and justifiably so. The other big thing that sort of Brainpan and memory I've found quite useful for is generally they will have 4. If it's one of those like flow charts in my head of Brainpan is going to get 4 influence, because I can usually get quite a lot out of that, because every single damaging result or every single result that memory has is momentous. It makes him an excellent momentum generator. Equally, as happened in a couple of my games recently, I've got the ball on Brainpan. It's come towards the end of, say, turn 1, and nothing's happening. The ability for Brainpan to pass to memory for a point of momentum, for memory to pass back to Brainpan for a point of momentum, for Brainpan to pass to memory for a point of momentum, and then memory to pass back to Brainpan for a point of momentum. That's a very reliable way of just generating 4 at the end of your turn, as you just pinball the ball between the two. Because there's nothing, they're not. Pulling the strings is the only one that's once per turn on that. But so you're looking at 3, rather than 4. But you can very reliably stack up a bit of momentum when your opponent's kind of thinking, oh, I've got 5, he's got 4, I'm probably safe here, I'm going to play this card. That sort of towards the end of the turn mental muttering that you can see people doing. So although nothing's really changed on Brainpan and memory, I still think they're amazing. I still think they're going to be in my teams more often than not.
I'm going to ask you at the end of these episodes who's not going to be in your team at this rate.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I think I certainly, it's certainly my intention once we've done all these Morticians previews is for the 3 of us to sit down and go through what we're playing in season 4. And both of you know that I don't know the answer to that question yet. And it will probably change before we speak and change during the time that we're talking, because one of you will sell me on a good idea. But what I can say for certainty is that Brainpan and memory will most certainly be in my roster. Who knows? Maybe I'll drop Graves.
Oh, look, a flying pig.
It's not Malifaux. We're not playing that game anymore. So moving on to Ghast then, to a model that certainly has not been in my roster for a long period of time, mainly due to my obsession with Casket. And it's interesting because I've frequently said, although they are both in the lineup in the very first Don't Touch the Beard, with Ghast and Casket in the lineup with Scalpel for what I think is an 11 influence team. Ghast has not been in my in my 6, because Casket is, and if Casket is always in my 6 and I'm not going to put Ghast in, then he might as well not be in my 10. Then you look back to WTC, where the 2 top Morticians players in Jamie Perkins and Timmy both pretty much played Casket and Ghast in every single game that they played. So I'm clearly wrong on this. So when you interrupted and said incorrectly, Connor, however so rudely it was, you are in fact seemingly correct.
I've been on team double big guy for a long time. So I actually think Ghast became underrated. But the other thing that happened is that the game did move away from him a little bit, mostly in that Morticians got other good options, and they lost their striking game with the loss of Avarice and Greed and Mist.
Yeah.
Which will hopefully be back now with Bonesaw. But I think I stand. This is an interesting one because I'm kind of with Timmy and Jamie in that I don't think this change was needed, but I also don't think it's not going to break Ghast, and he's not going to be in every 6 now anyway. So I think it's fine. But he's still really good.
I know Dave Cameron is a big fan of Ghast. and he very kindly spent a long time talking to me about him. And to be fair, a lot of what he said made complete sense to me. Is that he tends to put Ghast in either as a ball holder against teams with long-range striker goal threats, because fear just messes with their maths.
It messes with it so much.
Which, when you've got Skulk and Horrific Odor, if you've got to pay 3 to charge Ghast, you physically no longer have enough influence to be able to shoot the ball. Even if you do get the ball off Ghast, you don't have 5 influence on missed. It's not possible. So he does a really good job at that. And the other thing he talked about was putting momentum generation in against ranged teams. So whether that's hunters or engineers or alchemists, it became a reliable way of generating momentum. And I must admit, I'd not given enough credence to those two things as reasons to put him into my lineups. I think I placed far too much emphasis on the fact that he didn't bring any influence. So Ghast is an interesting one now, and that all the reasons that I used to talk myself out of why I shouldn't take him aren't there anymore. But all of the reasons why other people said he was good still are. So this is quite a big buff in many ways.
So you said Ghast is quite good at the anti-striker game, and he is. But that brings up an interesting point, because we also said the same thing about Casket, and we said the same thing about Vet Graves, and we haven't even gotten to Skulk, who's actually one of the best models out there for it. So you could run, it wouldn't be a good team, but you could run a team with all 4 where you're just like, you probably won't do very well, but God, your opponent won't either. The game where no one has fun.
That just makes my heart sore, Connor. And that's where my good friend Mr. Clock comes in. 12 VP on Clock is still 12 VP. But yeah, I must try that against your fish. That sounds a great team.
It would be pretty funny, actually.
So yeah, it is quite a welcome return for Ghast, especially the unmasking. Will still hurt Vile Swarm, but Vile Swarm exploding won't hurt Ghast. That's nice. I'm still trying to think of a way of guaranteeing that, and I can't wrap my brain around it. I don't think there's a way of doing it, sadly. But I'll keep trying. Ben, anything on Ghast?
Just say, I remember at BonesCon when I played our Queen Maria in a game, and she played Ghast, and she just gave me an absolute clinic into how you can essentially use unmasking as a variety of scything blow almost. And it's just like pile of damage, and then at the end of it, pile more damage and shove you away. And it's just like, oh, okay, that's what he does. Now what do I do?
He's also got a great counterattack, double push on 2, knockdown on 2. It's looked like, and I could be wrong, but it's felt like to me they've removed a lot of combined results in Season 4. A lot, not so much the ones that define a player, but a lot of the time when there's just a random, 4 damage dodge on the final column, they've just changed it to a 4. And to see Ghast keep his 2 damage knockdown on 3 is really nice, because that is such a good result.
I mean, as another player who loves my football of all kinds, he's such a nightmare to get away from. If you want to try and hit him and bounce off, well, that's going to cost you 2 influence. If you've got, for example, if you're Philip trying to bounce off him, if you do damage him, well, you give the Morticians 2 more momentum. And if you just try and walk away, well, that's a knockdown on 2. Trying to get away from the guy. I think that's why we mentioned him slightly more than in passing in the Scalpel review. Is let's shut a model down by putting Ghast next to it. That's a thing.
Yeah, I do think that that Scalpel and Ghast pair very, very well together, purely because all right, at the 7-inch sprint, he's not a slow model, but the 4-inch jog certainly isn't the quickest. So slightly below average, but she can really put things into a position where he can make their day miserable. And as ever, as a Morticians player, that is the ultimate goal, is to make your opponent as miserable as possible. Hey, I don't write them. I just play them.
Also, Ghast seems to be the one big guy who refuses to learn to kick the ball.
Given that he's dead, that doesn't seem unreasonable.
Yeah, he's probably not got the time.
Perfect. All right, then we shall leave it there and come back with the next episode very shortly.